Today is May 17th, 2007. I'm Rita Albers at the Warhawk Air Museum in Nampa, Idaho. I will be interviewing Bob Charters for our Veterans History Project in partnership with the Library of Congress. The camera operator is Jerry Birch. Welcome.
Thank you.
And if we may, we need your name, address, and birth date, and branch of military and years served.
My name is Bob Charters. Address is 6871 East Greens Drive. East Greens Drive, Nampa, Idaho, 83687. And the branch of service was the Army National Guard. I joined it in 1959 in Emmett, Idaho. Went to basic training in 1960 and came home in November of 1960. And went to the Idaho Military Academy, got my commission, and went on to armor school and then flight school. And then a year after I was out of flight school, I went back to Southern Airways and become an instructor in helicopters. And while I was with Southern Airways, we had 3 of our guys go with a company called Air America. And they wrote back and told about $50,000 a year they were making. And I had just finished an interview with United Airlines for $900 a month. So it wasn't hard to decide which place I wanted to go. So,
would you tell us, Mr. Charters, about your childhood, your parents, siblings?
Well, I was born here in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho, at St. Alphonsus. In my first 4 years, I was raised in what is known as the White House in Garden Valley. My grandfather built the house in 1918. And it was the first house that had indoor plumbing in it in Garden Valley. And we left from Garden Valley and went to Lake Lowell, and my dad worked for Gordon Saxton. And I started school at Lake Lowell, first grade. And then we moved to Melba, and I went through the 8th grade in Melba, and then we moved to Emmett, and I finished high school in Emmett. And that's where I joined the National Guard.
Did you have brothers, sisters?
I got 3 brothers. Mm-hmm. And my brother's a year younger than I am, was also in the National Guard for about the same amount of years as I've been, 27 years. He was at the end, he was a food service officer, and after I got out of the aviation portion because of health problems, then I became the brigade food service officer, and he also was a cook. So we kind of worked together. We've always worked together as kids growing up, so it was nothing new.
Why your choice of the National Guard? Why did you happen to pick that? Because
I didn't want to go to the Army. And I only wanted to put 6 years in and get out. I ended up retiring after 27 years. So.
Where did you take your basic training when you
Basic
joined?
training was in Fort Ord, California.
And for how long?
6 months.
After the basic training, where did they transfer you?
Well, I returned back to Emmett, to the National Guard unit. And just, stayed there. And then Captain DeCoplis talked me into going to the OCS program, which was the Idaho Military Academy. And I kept trying to talk my way out of it. And finally, in February, Colonel Smith came over to talk about Idaho Military Academy. And it was colder than heck outside. And I decided it was nicer to be inside listening to him than outside washing the trucks. And then he talked about aviation, and that was what hooked me, because I'd always wanted to fly. And so I joined up and went to the Idaho Military Academy, and then on to armor school, because you had to be branch qualified before you went to flight school. And then I went to Camp Walters, Texas, and then on to Fort Rucker. And we was there for 9 months and got trained and checked out in a helicopter. And came back, and then I went back to Southern Airways of Texas. They had the contract to train the primary students. And I went back there as a flight instructor.
You were a captain. When were you commissioned to be a captain?
Well, I was never a captain in the National Guard. I got up to first lieutenant before I resigned my commission and went with Air America. In my first 6 months with Air America, I was a first officer. And then after 6 months, you were promoted to captain. And that's a captain in the airlines. So, and we traveled throughout the world on different airlines at 50% discounted tickets. So, you know, it was a good thing. That's because we were working under CAT. And CAT was a civil air transport there was a Taiwan flag carrier. So we operated under them because the CIA owned them and bought them out. Anyway, when we flew any place, it was always on, you know, like Pan Am or SAS or Thai International or Cathay Pacific or Capt. Cat had, now this is a good story, Cat had one airframe and two complete aircrafts, including the engines, the seating for the passengers, all the instruments. They had two complete 707s. And then when they come in for overhaul, they come in and they strip all this stuff out, put in all the new stuff, and taxi out. It never missed a flight. They come in, do their turnaround, and go back out. Then they'd work on the seats, cleaning them, fixing them. They go through the instruments, checking them all out. And it was quite interesting how they operated. And then they downgraded to a 727 later on in life. But it was a beautiful aircraft. It had a teakwood headboard, you know, like most of your airlines when it divided to first class from second class. It was all teakwood, hand carved. And they treated you very well on that airline. So I don't know where to go from here.
When you were approached to work for Air America, where were you?
I was in Mineral Wells, Texas at the time, and I wasn't really approached by Air America. I had called Washington, D.C. and inquired about a job with them. And three of us, Ted Helmers, Charlie Basham, and myself, flew up to Washington, D.C., and we went through a 5-hour interview. And they told us they'd let us know if we were going to be hired or not. And they paid our way up and back. And we went back to Mineral Wells. And we were told there'd be a lot of things that we did that we couldn't talk about. And to make sure that if you talked about anything that you cleared it with somebody if it was okay. But after a period of time with Air America, you learn what you could talk about, what you couldn't talk about. Anyway, went back, and about 2 weeks later, I got a letter confirming that I was hired with first class tickets to Saigon via Tokyo, Taipei, Bangkok, and then Saigon. And I was actually hired by CAT, which was the owner of Air America, Air Asia, Southern Air Transport, and Continental Air Service. And when I got to Taiwan, I was fired, and I was picked up by Air Asia. In the 3 days that we were there, we got our uniforms all made, and then we flew on to Bangkok and went through a week of ground school in the 204B. It's similar to a Huey that the Army had. And then after we got through there, we went to Saigon, and in Saigon I got fired from Air Asia and hired by Air America, because Air America could not hire us out of the United States, but CAT could because it was a airline.
And this is the helicopter? This
is the helicopter that I flew in Vietnam. And
what
then
was it? Could you tell us?
It's a 204B. We had 5 204Bs that were made in Japan and shipped to Saigon, and we had 5 that was made in the United States. The 5 that was made in the United States had a 2-hour fuel capacity, and this one here, I don't know which one this one is, but anyway, the other one had an 1.5-hour fuel capacity. The 5 that had the 1.5-hour fuel capacity was used for USAID. Any USAID mission that we went on
Now you'll have to explain that to us.
That's United States Aid to International Development. We hauled rice and people and anything that could get on the helicopter got hauled.
So you transported wounded also?
Yeah, if it came up, that we had to haul wounded, we would do it. Because we got paid a monthly salary, plus anything over 85 hours, we got paid overtime. So we flew at any drop of the hat that somebody wanted. But then the other helicopters, the other 5, flew for USAID. And in the USAID helicopters, we had 2 captains. And in the USAID, we had a captain and a first officer. So you got all your training the first 6 months doing things for USAID. And then later, when you become a captain, then you was in on the other stuff. That embassy, we flew a lot of embassy people. I was involved in hauling Senator Percy, and I can't remember whether he's out of Illinois or Indiana, but someplace in the middle part of the United States. Him and his wife was over there visiting, and we landed and let him out. And they picked up some gunfire, and we took off and took his wife to a safe spot, dropped her off, and then came back and picked him up and got him out of there.
Now, where were you?
That was in Vietnam. And what part of it, I can't remember now.
Okay.
Right. We, as Air America, we flew from the DMZ. Yeah. We flew from the DMZ, which is right there, clear down to here, and we all lived in Saigon. We had homes in Saigon. Our families were in Saigon. And I-Corps, this is what they called I-Corps in this area. When we flew up there, we lived for 6 days in Da Nang. And we flew out of the Da Nang area in this area. And then we'd come home and we'd be off for 3 or 4 days, and then you'd either go to Kanto, which would be in Area 5, I think is how they called it. And we flew out of Saigon in this area, and then we went to Nha Trang and we stayed there. Each time we went out of town, we were out for 6 days. Then we'd come home and then be reassigned someplace else. So we flew the whole, whole country of Vietnam, where the Army, they were in I-Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. They stayed in those areas. And I've landed here. I landed here with some USAID people, and they met with some people from North Vietnam. And after we landed and let them off, we flew back about 3 miles and landed on a little hilltop and watched. And then when they called us, we went up and picked those guys up and returned them back to Da Nang. Trying to think of some other little things, but anyway, we got each month we got 6 days scheduled time off, what they called STO, and we could go where we wanted to. We could hop a aircraft that was leaving out of Saigon to Taiwan, because all our maintenance was done in Taiwan, the major overhauls, and they drop us off in Hong Kong and we'd go shopping. And when they come back, we'd load the airplane up with all the stereo equipment that we bought and suits and everything, then come back into Saigon. And our families were allowed to live with us in Vietnam. Some of the guys didn't want their families there. They kept them in Bangkok, Singapore, and then they'd go out for their STO, or scheduled time off, and stay with their families. But the guys that had families in there, they would go to Hong Kong to pick up stuff, their wives couldn't go on the flights. So just the guys got to go. And one of my wife came to Saigon, and she came in January, and in March I sent her back because she was going down to the officers club, spending more time than what I thought she should. And she wasn't down there just entertaining them by singing. So anyway, I sent her home, and when I put her on the airplane, my son, who was 3 years old, screamed and bawled on the flight, saying that he didn't want to go with her, he wanted to stay with me. It was pretty hard to not take her off the airplane and let the locals have her, but I sent her home. And June, I was out in Hong Kong on an STO, and I called home and talked to my parents because I had got a letter and my son was with my parents. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning here when I called from Hong Kong. And I asked my mom if I could talk to him, and she said, well, he's asleep. And I said, well, wake him up. And she woke him up, and he came on the phone, and he says, I've told this for many years, and it always happens the same way, but anyway, he said, hi, Daddy, I love you. Please come home and get me. And I bawled like a baby in Hong Kong. So anyway, when the maintenance flight came back and we got on in Hong Kong, got back in Saigon on Sunday, Monday morning I went out to the chief pilot and I told him I needed an emergency leave and explained why, you know, to go and get my son. And he said, well, he didn't know that would happen. And I said, well, I'll have to quit, but I'm going to get my son. So Tuesday he called me in and said, your tickets are ready. You leave Wednesday at 11 o'clock on Pan Am. I left 11 o'clock in the morning and I was in Emmett at 7 o'clock that same night, and on Pan Am, because everything was, you know, just scheduled right. And picked up my son, and that was on Wednesday. Thursday, I called Washington, D.C. and talked to H.H. Dawson. He was our personnel director. Told him what the deal was, that I'd come home to get my son and the reason why. And he said, and I said, she has his passport, and there's no way she's going to give it to him if I go to Boise and ask for it. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And 15 minutes later, he called back and he said, be in Seattle at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and your passport will be ready. Get 2 photos and bring them with you. And when I hung up, my mom says, who do you work for? And I said, you don't need to know who I work for. Because at that time I couldn't tell her. So anyway, I got my tickets and went home, got him, and took him back and raised him over there for quite a few years. And I transferred after the 68 Tet Offensive, because at the 68 Tet Offensive I was going to work and I got caught in a house for 29 hours with the bad guys on top shooting at the good guys across the street. And there was 3 of us. There was 2 fixed-wing pilots and myself. We took 11 bullet holes in our car, and we hopped into the house that belonged to one of our crew chiefs in the helicopters, and his wife and 18-month-old baby was in there. So we got in there and boarded everything up so that the bad guys couldn't get in the house, and protected her, put her in the bathroom. The bathroom was in the middle of the house, and we put her in the middle and then put the mattresses on top so that when the baby cried, they couldn't hear it. And 29 hours later, we got out of there. And we watched 3 Morrison Knudsen people that was in a truck ahead of us get shot down because they got out of the truck and started to run, and they were killed. But we operated without weapons. We were not allowed weapons in our job. But I'll guarantee you, when I got out of there, I had a .45 in my flight bag, kept it hid. Because if I'd have had one then, and somebody come in the door, at least I could have got one before they got me. That's what I looked at. It was a good exchange that way. But anyway, my son that I went and got is now I tell people he's a drug dealer because he works for the pharmaceutical companies. But he's a manager for them, so I didn't do too bad raising him. And he loves his mother and thinks the world of her. He has no idea what went on, except, you know, she got Christmas cards and Mother's Day cards and birthday cards every year, and I never badmouthed her. But
How long did you have him in Vietnam? How long?
Oh, in Vietnam I had him, a year and a half, and then during this, about a year, because then after the 68 Tet Offensive, when I was where I was at and he was back in another place, when I got out of there, I moved him out from Saigon to Bangkok with another guy's and his family. He had a wife and 8 kids, and he said, "Hell, there's one more ain't going to make any difference. He can stay there with her." So, but we had a close-knit family. I mean, the Air America people, you know, and we still do. We have a reunion every year, someplace in the United States. Last year, I think it was in Jackson, Florida. Before that, it's in Dallas. In Dallas, at the University of Texas, Dallas, we have an Air America Museum, and it's got a list of all the people. Well, on this, that talks about 243 people that was killed. Those 243 are on that memorial at the University of Texas in Dallas.
Did you ever figure out how many missions you flew when you were over there?
A lot. We flew 10 to 12 hours a day when we went out.
And how many were on your crew on board?
There was 3.
Did you alternate? Like, so you could get some sleep and then another crew would go out, or did you just keep?
We didn't know, because in the helicopters, we had 2 captains, or in the embassy, and you could fly 2 captains on the CIA birds, but they usually had first officer. As soon as we was filled up with captains, but we just took turn. You'd fly one leg and the next guy fly another leg, because you had dual controls. And the crew chief, he made sure the people didn't crowd our helicopters. They had little cattle prods, had batteries in them, and if the people got to crowding too much, they just reach out and push them, just put a little shock in them, and they'd run off and pull up their dresses. The ladies wouldn't look and see what got them. But, we usually just told people. People come up with notes and say, I go, whatever town, you take me. I said, no, we're not going there. So he pulled out another note, I go here, No, I ain't going there. He said, where you go? I said, oh, we're going to Hanoi. Oh, I know go Hanoi. So we would haul them any place. But one time we landed at a place, and they had been crowding the heck out of us to get on. Because no matter where we landed, they all thought they could ride for free. And a lot of them did. And
excuse me, were they escaping, a lot of them escaping?
Sometimes, if the enemy had got in around their village, they wanted to get out of there. Or they wanted to fly to Saigon to do shopping and then come back. But they knew that, that the helicopters went every place and could land anywhere. So we landed one time, and it was lunchtime, and I told the crew chief, I said, just open up the door and let them in. We're going to lunch anyway. We closed the door up. Now, this helicopter was designed to haul 9 people, plus crew chief and 2 pilots. And we came back from lunch an hour later and opened the doors up and unloaded 29 people out of that helicopter. They do the same thing on their buses in that country. You'll see pictures of them. They got pigs and chickens, and they even had pigs and chickens on there with them. But they carried anything and everything. And, as long as it would take off, they were happy. They didn't care about your weight factor. But they do the same thing on their buses and their taxis. They just load them up and go.
Was there any certain one area where you were that you ran into more danger than the other cities or areas?
We, not so much in Vietnam, because we had, the reason I say that is because there was American people, military, Marines and Army and Navy. We landed down in here in a Navy camp and talked to them, and we hauled different entertainers around for the troops and drop them off, like the what do they want to call them? The Green Beret people. They were in little camps out here in the Mekong Delta. And we hauled this one German stripper out, and she'd do a little strip for them, and then we'd move them to another camp, and we just moved them around. And on the way back to Saigon with her, she says, you guys, you just flew me everywhere, and you didn't get to see my show. So I'll put the one on for you back here. So she goes through her little strip back to the back of the helicopter. We said, well, we really don't need it, because we had our wives there. These guys didn't have their wives and things over there. It was a little different. I should say wives. I didn't have mine. I just had my son. But my son and I, we went to Hong Kong. We had clothes made alike. When we went out, if I had a red suit on, he had a red suit on. If I had a you know, gold jacket on. He had a gold jacket on. We had everything made alike, and we dressed alike. But anyway, I left Vietnam in, and I can't remember the month, but it was in '68. It was after the '68 Tet Offensive, and I moved up in the northern part of Thailand. Air America had an operation out of there. We had an operation in Saigon, fixed wing and helicopters. And at the time that I was with him, Air America was the largest airlines in operation. And that's all of these people. So, you know, Air America and Air Asia was our maintenance people. It's funny because when we fly, and everybody considered us Air America, but the pilots were Air America and the crew chief worked for Air Asia. But because they was all under the same hat, it didn't make any difference. They still consider themselves Air America. But anyway, up in Thailand, I lived up in Udon, which is about 30 miles from the Laotian border. It's kind of hard to read that. That's Cambodia, so this is Thailand. But anyway, we'd fly out of Udon and go up into Laos, and we spent a lot of time in the northern Laos. When I was flying out of Savannakhet here, we hauled some people. We were at 10,500 feet in a H-34. Up in Laos, I was flying H-34s instead of the Huey. And at 10,500 feet with the load we had on, 60 knots was our airspeed that we could get. And we got anti-aircraft fire at us, watching it go off around us. So after the next trip, we took the back cushion out and we put a parachute on, because those H-34s are made out of magnesium, and magnesium burns almost instantaneously. At 5,000 feet, you have no more aircraft. So we thought at least we'd bail out. But anyway, I would point in an area, but I can't point past this red line because that's in North Vietnam. But we hauled people. I won't say any more about it. You can take it from there where they went. They weren't in the purple area. But when we made those missions, it was called greenies, and we got paid extra money per landing or per hour, whichever was greater. So if we went out and made 3 landings in an hour, we got 150 bucks. If we went out and spent 3 hours and made 1 landing, then we got 150 bucks because it was the greater of the two. But we had to sign up, and we had to sign a sworn secrecy to operate on those types of missions. But there was extra money, and sometimes you can make some. If you was especially evacuating, you know, a place and it was under a lot of fire, well, that's when we got the extra pay. And some of the guys didn't want it, so they didn't sign up. And when Air America came out with the movie, and they came out with a movie, and I'll just put this in to begin with, that what's that guy's name?
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson's in, and it portrayed us as drug runners and hauling drugs here and there. And all the time that I was with Air America, I never saw a bit of drugs, and I'm a very anti-drug person, and I'd turn in my own kid if he was on drugs. And so I know that for my part, whatever I saw, I never saw drugs. And Mel Gibson portrayed it, that he walked out on the flight line and says, I'll fly this over here, or I'll fly that over there. And that ain't the way it was. We were professional pilots, and you were checked out either in the Dornier, the Plattus Porter, the DC-3, the C-46, the C-47, the Caribou, the helicopter, and that's what you flew. And if you wanted to change, then you put in and you trained and you went to that aircraft. But a lot of the people flew what they signed up to fly, and that's what they stayed with. And we had a lot of different aircraft. We had them sitting on the flight line out there with no numbers on the tail. And if one of them wrecked, the next day, the one that wrecked had that number on its tail section, which isn't the way it's supposed to be done, but over there you can do what you want to. And we always had spare aircraft around. We had every make and model. And when I first got orientated in Vietnam. I was orientated in a Pilatus Porter, and that is the greatest fixed wing. It's next to a helicopter. The only difference between a helicopter and a Pilatus Porter is it takes off straight, and the helicopter takes off straight up. So.
Do you have any idea, any estimate how many planes were involved with Air America? Are you allowed to say?
I'm allowed to say,
largest.
but we had a big what I want to say, a big conglomerate of fixed wing in Vinh Chinh, Laos. Vinh Chinh, Laos was one of our main deals. I think Vinh Chin's right there. Anyway, Vinh Chinh had all the fixed wing, and U Dorn down here had all the helicopters. And we had 205s in Laos. We didn't have 205s in Vietnam. We had 205s in Laos, and we had H-34s. And when I went up, they didn't have any space in the 205, so I went into the H-34 and trained in that. And I was trying to think how many helicopters we had. We had probably close to 20 of them in U Dorn. And the fixed wing, God, I don't know, they had scads of them up there in Laos.
And all these planes and helicopters were 24 hours a day. They were in use. Is that correct?
The 24-hour operation took place here in Savannah, Capt. And we had it's like a twin beach. And a twin beach is the old reciprocating engine. There was a tail dragger. They converted it to a Volpar. It had turbine engines on it and a nose wheel. They flew those 24 hours on station.
And what did they transfer?
What they were doing is Ho Chi Minh Trail ran down through this area, and they circled this area 24 hours a day. And an airplane would take off from Savannah, Capt, go up, and they were flying at 20,000 feet. So they were sucking oxygen the whole time. Anyway, when they come in on station, then the other ones would go home. But they flew 12 hours straight. And there's 2 pilots in it. And then they change out, and the other ones come home. But they were out there for 6 days at a time, then they'd come home. In fact, my next door neighbor, her husband was one of the pilots for that. And, but they'd, were 24 hours. You was asking about 24 hours earlier, and I said, we didn't do 24 hours, but this is the only operation that they did. And the people that was on the ground would transmit up all the movement that they saw, and then they would transmit it from there to Vinh Chinh, and Vinh Chinh to transport it to Washington, D.C. So they knew what was going on quite a bit of the time.
That takes your breath away. You were over there for quite a long time. What made you decide to get out?
Well, I was in Bangkok one time. Every time I go to Bangkok, of course, my little son was like a magnet with women, because he'd be out swimming in the pool, and they'd say, "Where's your mommy and daddy?" He said, "I don't have a mommy, I just got a daddy." The next thing, he was by me, "Daddy, I want you to meet so-and-so." And I got to meet a lot of women, but at that time I wasn't too interested in marriage. But I met this Pan Am stewardess, and we got to meeting there every month. She was schedule her flights into Bangkok, and I'd schedule my STO to be in Bangkok at the same time. And we'd catch a train here at U Dorn, and we'd take the train clear down to Bangkok. And that was an interesting train ride. We get on at 6 o'clock at night, and get in Bangkok at 6 o'clock in the morning. So we'd party a lot going down, and then spend 7 days and get on the train at 6 in the evening at Bangkok, and get off the train at 6 in the morning in U Dorn, and the Volkswagen bus would be there to pick us up because they knew where we were at. And then they'd take me to my house. I'd walk in, put my suitcase down from Bangkok, pick up my suitcase for up country, put on my flight suit, and go out the door and get on the bus and go up country. And we lived there's in the movie, well, I got off the subject, I got into Mel Gibson's deal, but Air America came out with a movie about 8 or 10 years ago. I can't remember now exactly when it was. It's called Air America, the Secret CIA Airlines. But there's also a book out called Air America, the Secret CIA Airlines, and that was written quite a few years back, about 20 years back, by a guy named Robbins. But this one, Air America, this is not it. This one, Air America, you can't read it from there, but anyway, it says Air America, the Secret CIA Airlines. And it goes through and talks about the places we flew, and most of it is in Laos. Most all this that's taken in this movie was taken up in Laos. And the airstrips, I mean, to see the movie and to see what those guys in the fixed wing had to do to go into land on these strips that were uphill, and that's the way they had to land. When they were committed to a landing, it was uphill, and they couldn't make a go around, so they were committed to that landing. And the people, they're kind of dumb in a way, but very intelligent in another. But they found out that when that windsock was straight down the runway, facing down the hill, the planes would land. But if it was crossways, they wouldn't land. So they got up and they fixed that sock so that it was always down the runway. And these guys had come in, and they're fighting it, and you can tell a crosswind. And they're fighting this thing. You say, God, the windsock's coming right at me. Well, it must be, down there. It must be straight down. And then they get in there, and of course they wreck it because they flip it over. I've hauled them out with the H-34. We'd strap them on the side of the helicopter and take the wings off and strap them on one side and the body on the other and the engine inside and haul it back to Vinshin. And I don't know how many. I think I hauled about 5 or 6 Pilatus Porters and 2 helio carriers out from up country. And
so you just haul just about everything and everyone then in your job.
They bring live animals out, and if we said we couldn't haul live animals, they'd shoot it and throw it on. And then we'd haul it out to their camps, where those people would have food to eat. And we hauled everything.
Did you haul food also?
Yeah. And everything.
That's amazing.
There's things we hauled. We in Laos, we actually did things that the military weren't allowed to do. There was no military in Laos. Air America was the military. And at that time, they give us carbines, little carbines to carry as a survival weapon. So, and we couldn't use it for anything except survival. So shooting the guy that was shooting at you, to us, was survival. But anyway, I came out at someplace up in this area here. We picked up a bunch of weapons one time. In fact, here at the Warhawk Museum, you've got those 2 weapons now. They're Mayo rifles, and they were handmade by the Laotian tribes up in Laos. And I've had them, I got them in 69. And I've had them for a long time, but I just don't have a place in my house for them. And I thought, coming out here to the museum and seeing the things that you guys have, and I've decided, well, at least they'd have a home and a lot of other people can see them. And trying to think of some other things. There's so many things in your mind, to try to go through all of it.
Is there any one outstanding experience you had that stays in your mind longer than anybody else or anything else?
Very much so.
If you're able to talk about it.
Up in this area, this is the Providence capital of Laos, and this is the main capital because there's more activity here, so that's how they decide the capital is going to be. We were going on a mission up here, and I was a senior captain, and the guy flying with me had been with Air America I would say about 4 months, 5 months, him and his wife and his 3 kids. He was a retired warrant officer out of the Army. So, you know, he was much older than I was, because when I went to work for Air America, I was 25 years old. Young kid and had no brains, you know, just green money signs, and thought that was it. And I wouldn't trade the experience for nothing. I mean, it was a good experience, and we've got a good group of people that, you know, we get together and reminisce. And you want to hear stories, just go down there and turn on your recorder, because they go back over all of them. But anyway, I had married this Pan Am stewardess that my son cooked me up with, and we came back to Udorn, and my first trip up country, the night before we was out at a swimming pool at one of the hotels, and Bill Gibbs and his wife and kids and my wife and my child were all by the pool, and we was talking, and Bill was talking about, we're flying together tomorrow. He said, I'm with you. And we were going on a mission that we were briefed for, and there was 2 helicopters, and one of them was an SAR, which is search and rescue. So if you got shot down, they were there to get you out. So we went up to Long Prabong, up in here, and we went out and landed and did our mission and came back, and we got briefed for the second mission. So on the way out, I told Bill, I said, you want to fly right seat? The right seat in the helicopter is the captain's seat. And he said, okay. So I took the left seat. And halfway out, he says, oh, I forgot the map. He said, go ahead and fly, and I'll go get the map. I said, no, I'll get it. You go ahead and fly. So I went back and got the map, and we got in, and we took off, and he landed. And when he took off from the area that we landed, he took off to the left, you know, with my side down toward the ground. And we started climbing out, and you could hear gunfire coming off. And all of a sudden, the helicopter jerked up like this. And in an H-34, if you lose your hydraulics, you got 1,500 pounds of pressure to control that helicopter. Well, this arm hasn't got 1,500 pounds of pressure. And so I figured that, you know, that's what happened. And he, you know, the cyclic kicked back at him, because that's what happens when you lose your hydraulics. And when I reached up and grabbed the controls, you know, they were loose. And I looked over, and he was slouched over in the seat. And the crew chief reached up and pulled his feet back off of the pedals, you know, because that controls your tail rotor. And I got him sat up. No, we didn't get him set up, because I couldn't get him set up. But he got his arm off from underneath the collective, and we flew back into Long Prabong. And when we landed there, I called ahead. And the brakes are on the right side, and the H-34 is to the left side. And we have wheels on it. So come in and make a landing, you know, you're supposed to set your brakes after you get on the ground. Well, I couldn't do that. I just had to land it and put everything down. When they come up and opened up the emergency exit off his door, and we sat him up, and the blood came running out of his head. And his window was open that far, and the bullet came through and got him right underneath the helmet. And he lived for 4 hours. We put him on we call it a C-123 with the K model. They had the jet engines assist on them. And they come in and landed and picked him up. And the pilot, the captain, when he took off, he put those jet engines on, and that jet engine.
We're going to let.
Anyway, the captain took off, and he activated those jet engines, and he left them on all the way to Bangkok, or to Udorn, to get that guy, you know, to a doctor, to a hospital in Udorn, because the Air Force had a base at Udorn. We were at one end of the airport up there, and the Air Force had the rest of it. But anyway, we got him off into the hospital, and I talked to the doctor later, and he said it didn't make any difference. He was dead when he got hit. But anyway, they tried to demote the captain back to first officer because he burned up those 2 engines trying to save one of our helicopter pilots. And you're talking about family. All the helicopter pilots says, all them helicopters stay put until you change your attitude. And that guy never got demoted because he did what he thought, was best for him. But, and it could have been, nobody knows. But anyway, Bill Gibbs got killed. And I went over and talked to his wife, and, because I felt kind of like it was my fault because I put him in the seat instead of taking the seat myself. But I made the landing, or we made the landing, because when I went out and I was senior captain, I never put anybody on the ground and I stayed up. That wasn't in my makeup. So, but anyway, I went and talked to Jackie, his wife, and she said, Bill enjoyed flying with you because you did trade seats. There's some of those captains, when they were captains, that was what they were, and they didn't want to trade seats. They had their ego problem. And I didn't have an ego problem because I just liked to fly. But anyway, it was quite a few years, and I'm going to say about 10 years ago now, and maybe not quite that far, I got a phone call from a young lady in Alaska, and it was Bill Gibbs's daughter. And she wanted to know what happened to her dad, because her mother wouldn't tell her. So I told her, I said, if you want to know, I'll tell you. So I told her the story, and she thanked me. So.
Was that toward where you were just about ready to get out by then?
Well, that was in May, and I didn't leave until the following January. And my wife, that I was married to at that time, when I asked her what she wanted for Christmas, she said, your resignation. And I thought, well, I'll write it up and give it to her, and in a Christmas card, call her bluff. But she didn't bluff. She took it out and gave it to the company, so I left the middle of January.
The middle of January.
We came home, and I picked up a fixed-wing license in Florida, and never used it for anything, but I had it. I ended up with a airline transport rating in helicopters, and type-rated in a S-58T, an FH-1100. I forget now what else. I was instrument rated in helicopters, and instrument rated in fixed wing, and multi-engine and single engine. And I think that's about it. But anyway.
Can you recall the day you were discharged, when you got out from Air America?
From Air America, well, we had a hell of a party at the Air America Club because, everybody was out there, and Air America had a club, had a swimming pool, and like I say, we were very family oriented and had a school. They had a school for the kids, whether you be in Udorn or Saigon. They took care of the families, and they still do. When you go to these reunions, the whole families, Ben Densley and his wife and all of his kids show up. They were pretty old then, and here they are. They show up. So.
How many do you suppose attend?
God, it's quite a few. I can't remember. When we went, I'll tell you a little story, and then we'll go from there. I have a gold bracelet at home that weighs almost a pound of gold, and I usually wear it a lot, but then I started taking it off because too many people recognize it's gold, and around here, you don't know how long you keep your arm. So, but anyway, the status symbol for Air America pilots was a gold Rolex and a gold bracelet. And if you got shot down up country in Laos, especially up in Laos, up in here, those people knew what gold was. They had no idea what paper money was. You could have your helicopter stuffed with $100 bills, and they wouldn't know what it was. You could have this one gold bracelet, and they knew what that was. And that's what it was for. You're supposed to take a link out a day, and they keep you alive. When they got you to freedom, then you give them the big piece. But then it become a status symbol. But at Air America, in 1979 in Las Vegas. My son and I went down for one of the reunions, and they took a tally on the gold bracelets and gold Rolexes, and that was when gold was at its almost highest point, and there was $9.5 million worth of gold in that meeting that day. And that wasn't counting the gold chains that they had on. They just did the Rolexes, and I still got my Rolex watch. It finally give out on me, and I sent it to have it fixed, but hell, I only paid $500 for it in Hong Kong. Now, you know, the things are like thousands of dollars. I think they wanted $8,000 or $9,000 to get it back up and running. And I said, nah, I'm not that. I got this fake Rolex, so.
So you were able to keep in contact with a lot of your comrades that were in Air America.
Yeah, they meet, like we met in Reno, we've met in Oak Harbor in Washington. Next year, I think they're meeting in Seattle. They've met they meet a lot in Dallas. Dallas seems to be a central point. They met up in New York. They meet in Florida. All over. They just, somebody that's in a spot. If I wanted to set up an Air America reunion here, I'd have to go through all the, you know, getting everything booked, some for them to do while they're here, golfing and all that, and then put it up to them, and then they vote on it. Do they want to come to Boise, Idaho? You know, if the Boise State was playing football, they probably would come. But anyway.
All this experience you had with Air America, National Guard, then the Air America, how has that contributed to your way of thinking about military and what we do?
What happened in Vietnam, you know, we were tuned in on all the military frequencies because we had to keep in contact with them when we was flying, because they kept track of us on their radar. And you'd heard them calling for an airstrike, and they said, well, we have to get the Providence chiefs okay before we can airstrike. Well, you know, then they'd be another hour before they could strike the enemy. And I thought, you know, why can't we come in here and fight the war? You know, we weren't involved in anything like that. We had a lot of close calls, you know, and we very seldom ever lost anybody to gunfire, except for the guy who was flying with me. And then they lost a few after I left. There was a black guy that was going in the plane of jars, and he got shot in the head. But that was the only one. There was some planes shot down, and but very, you know, I think we're very fortunate, especially in Saigon. The 10 helicopters we had, we never lost a helicopter to enemy action. We lost one on a training flight, and the guy that was being checked out pulled stick too much at the end and wrecked and killed 2 of the people on board. And we lost that helicopter. But it didn't take them long to find another one and paint it blue and white.
Now we have here something we wanted to show, and this was in 2001.
2001.
And this is the United States of America Central Intelligence Agency. And this is it's not a commendation.
Citation.
It's citation. Can you explain a little bit about this, please?
Well, the CIA came to our reunion in 2001, and the guy that just resigned out of the CIA, I can't think of his name right now, is on the bottom of that. But anyway, he's the one that got up and give the presentation of this, and he told us, he said, this is 30 years coming. He said Air America was the best kept secret, and he said it's still the best kept secret. And then they give us this unit citation award. And he said if you didn't get it this year, he said when I become the head of CIA, you would have got it. So.
And this is signed by?
Signed by the CIA guy that just resigned. I don't have my glasses.
George Tenet. I knew that was familiar. And what about this coin? Would you explain a little bit about the coin?
This is a kind of a memorabilia that they give us also. We had to sign for it. but it tells how many people we lost. From 1947 to 1975, we lost a total of 243 people.
How many? I'm sorry.
243,
right there.
it's right on the coin.
243, it's on the coin.
And it's too bad that, you know, we can't all fight the war that way. We had, and if you watch this, well, even this tape here, that just says Air America, you'll see when they say they had professional pilots, you know, what they meant by professional pilots, because of the area that they flew and the conditions they flew under. During the smoky season up in Laos, we flew with a map in one hand and our head out the window because you couldn't see very far. We didn't have any aids up there to fly to, you know. We just had to, oh yeah, I remember that rock. See, there should be another rock up here. Oh yeah, this is it. And that's how we flew through the valleys and, you know, go in and land and drop off and come back. And we used to pick up a lot of military people up in Laos that were bombing up here in Hanoi, and then they get shot and they head here because they knew this was safe country. And we had aircraft all over the country up there, and if they called a mayday, we were on their tail. A lot of times we were sitting on the ground waiting for the parachute to get the ground so we could pick them up. And we did that for quite a few years, and then the ambassador to Laos said that the Air Force had to pick up their own people. We could no longer pick them up. So we paid about as much attention to that as your mother telling you can't have another cookie, you know. But anyway, when somebody got shot down, we got the guy to safety. And then when the Air Force got on site, we found a safe area, and we'd go and land and let him out, then they'd pick him up. So they were still picking him up. And there's a Navy pilot give a talk at one of our Air America reunions, and he was a recipient of our pilots, and he was in contact with him, and he said the only thing he kept thinking was, God, I hope Air America picks me up. I don't want the Air Force to pick me up. And he says, and I could hear that my ship talking to somebody else, you know, that they were going to discontinue the search because where he was out in Laos somewhere. And he said, I'd heard these stories that Air America people will pick you up. And he says, the next thing I knew, there was helicopters all over the sky. He said they weren't Army, and they weren't Navy, and they weren't Air Force. He said, that only left one people. So anyway, he got pulled out, but he didn't have much to say for his Navy people because they didn't put out much effort to get him. But, you know, we were always there, and one of our pilots, Harry, what's his name? When I transferred from Saigon up to Udorn, I met them in Bangkok, and he gave me the keys to his house because they wouldn't be back for a week, so I could have a place to stay when I got there. Well, that was good, but he didn't tell me where the damn thing was. So when I got to Udorn, I had to ask people, where does Herb Baker live? So anyway, Herb, and I went to his house, and we stayed there. Then I got me a place. But Herb Baker went in. It was kind of foggy, and the Air Force people didn't want to go down in the fog in the valley. And Herb says, hell, those mountains only go, at a V in. All you got to do is just come hover down the side of them. They weren't going to do that. So Herb goes down, hovers down, and finds the guy and picks him up and brings him back up to a hilltop, drops him off, and the Air Force landed and picked him up and took him back into Vientiane. But we had a lot of times when we picked up people after the ambassador told us we couldn't, that we got them to a place where it was safe. They were always secure. And
so all the pilots weren't military as such. They were
ex-military.
Ex-military.
I don't think we had a pilot that wasn't an ex-military. Either retired out of the Air Force. Most of the fixed-wing pilots were retired Air Force because the Army doesn't have a lot of fixed-wing people, big, heavy aircraft. They had the little bird dogs and things like that. But in the Navy, we had a few. I was flying with a lieutenant colonel retired in Vietnam. And one day, I forget what he said, we was flying along, we were both captains with Air America. And he says, You don't know who I am. I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel William G. Mauser. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, you're a captain with Air America. Boy, that ticked him off. He didn't like that. But, you know, my whole tenor with the military, I was enlisted, and then I went to OCS, and I got a commission. When I was back at Fort Knox, we was going in the PX, and a young, slick sleeve guy was coming out, and he had 2 bags, and you could see he was trying to get, you know, into one arm, the bags, so he could salute. And I saluted him. I told him to carry on. And the guy I was with was an ROTC graduate, and he starts chewing on this guy's hind end. And I went back and I said, what in the hell are you doing? And he said, he didn't return your salute. I said, he doesn't have to. I said, all he has to do is make an attempt, and he did that. And I said, you get off his butt. We walked in the PX, and I told him, I said, you know, you're going to be the first casualty when you get on the front line. You keep up like that, buddy. I said, you got to treat your people like you like to be treated. And I've done that all the way through. Then when I got back in the National Guard in, 79, I think it was, and finished out in 95, I got back in as a warrant officer. And at first I was a little disappointed because I thought, well, God, I went to OCS to get a commission. I'd like to have my commission back. But the warrant officer slot is the best position you can have in the military. And
would you explain that?
It's because you don't have to comply with all the things the commission officer does, and you kind of live the life of an enlisted man, but you are commissioned. But you're warrant is what they call it. And when I was flying out here in the Guard and flying the grunts around, they'd do anything. Like we was up at Yakima, and they knew I hated to salute because I just think it's a bunch of crap. I think when you're out with a bunch of your people, you don't have to salute them all the time. You don't go down the street in Nampa saying good morning to everybody. You know, so why should you have to do it there? That's, you know, I think if you treat your people right, they treat you right. But anyway, they got in the line. They said, Mr. Charters, when are we going back to helicopter? And I said, oh, whenever we, you know, about 10 minutes, that's when we have to be taken off. They said, okay. So they all left the PX, and I left the PX and was heading to the helicopter, and here they come, saluting me. So all the other people around were saluting too, you know. They didn't know that these guys were doing it just to torment me. And then when they got back to the helicopter, they said, we got you, didn't we, Mr. Charters? I said, yeah, you guys did.
That's a lot of respect.
Yeah, and we go places, we go to Express Cafe, and there'll be people say, hi, Mr. Charters, and there was people in the Guard with me, you know. And my wife says, how can they call you Mr. Charters? And I said, they don't have to. And it's just, you know, the respect I got after I was the ammo officer for a while, and then General Kane put me in as a brigade food service officer, which was a good position. And but I've always treated my people like I'd like to be treated, and when you do that, you know, they respect you. And I don't care what kind of rank the highest has on his shoulder. If they're screwing with my people, they're screwing with me.
Well, thank you, sir, for it's been an honor to meet you, and thank you so much for serving our country. We really appreciate it.
I'm sorry for what's going on in Iraq. If I was running this world, I'd just pull all our troops out and I'd say, okay, every Saturday if you people aren't getting along, we're going to come over and bomb you. And when the week goes that you all get along, we won't bomb you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.